This is the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing for January 21st. We have a number of bills on our agenda this evening, but the first item is we have the reappointment of Michael Trafficante to the Airport Corporation. It is a reappointment. If any members of the committee have any questions, obviously we can get the questions to him, but because it's a reappointment, we've generally they don't have to show up. Are there any questions or comments? Senator Lombardo moves the advice and consent of Michael Trafficante for reappointment to the Rhode Island Airport Corporation. Seconded by Senator Archibald. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The bill passes. The next bill we'll do is Senator Crowley's bill, Bill number 2056, that prohibits the sale of powdered caffeine to any person under the age of 18 and possession of powdered caffeine to anyone under the age of 18. We do have a couple of people signed up to speak on the bill. Cathy, Kushna, the Department of Health sent a letter. Randall Rose. Those witnesses can come forward. You want to speak on it also? Good afternoon and welcome, Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. So this bill is to criminalize the possession of powdered caffeine, and it has a penalty of a fine of $500 for first offense, and later offenses can have imprisonment. Makes it illegal for people under the age of 18 to possess powdered caffeine in any quantity. Now, I know powdered caffeine is not harmless. There have been cases of people suffering fatal overdoses from powdered caffeine. So that does happen. It's quite rare, but it does happen. But even though it does happen occasionally that people overdose on powdered caffeine, this bill applies to any quantity of powdered caffeine, including quantities too small to cause an overdose. And you'd actually need a fairly substantial quantity of powdered caffeine to cause a fatal overdose. The fatal dose is somewhere about 150 or 200 milligrams per kilogram. So if you just have a pinch of powdered caffeine, it is not going to kill you. And caffeine is not a very dangerous drug to begin with, as long as you don't take it in huge quantities. There are no known cases of people becoming addicted to caffeine. The withdrawal symptoms from caffeine, such as they are pretty mild and last only a day, much milder than for other drugs. And it is caffeine does not. Caffeine is, as long as you don't take it in huge quantities, is not necessarily fatal. I would think instead of making this a criminal offense, sorry, and I misspoke at the beginning. The criminal offense is for providing powdered caffeine to people under age 18. So if one teenager gives another teenager powdered caffeine, then they can be criminally charged. I think it does not make a lot of sense for this relatively non-dangerous drug to be giving criminal penalties, especially for quantities too small to cause overdoses. That we really do not need to be expanding the war on drugs for one of the safer drugs around. And I can see that the bill might be okay if it was limited to to possessing dangerous quantities, but with no limitation on quantities, this bill is really unnecessarily sending people into the criminal justice system, and I think it might be more prudent to establish a licensing regime where teenagers and adults who want the thrill of consuming a larger than usual amount of caffeine can do so safely, because there are apparently people who want to do this, and it's because caffeine is such an easy drug to keep safe as long as you keep the quantities down. It might be safer just to provide licensed facilities rather than making this a criminal matter. So for those reasons, I'm opposing the bill in the current form.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Are there any questions or comments for Mr. Rose? Thank you. Is there anyone else present who would like to testify on this bill? With that, Senator Jabbour moves passage, seconded by Senator Lynch. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The bill passes. The next bill is Bill 2057, and this is a bill of Senator Velasquez that we've previously passed. Is anyone signed up to testify? We also have some written testimony on this bill. Senator Lynch moves passage, seconded by Senator Jabbour. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The bill passes. The next bill we have is Solemnization of Marriage Bill by Senator Golden. Senator Jabbour moves passage, seconded by Senator Lynch. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The bill passes. The next bill we have is Senator Lombardo's bill relative to powdered alcohol. And we do have a couple of people signed up to testify. Lynette Boisels, Cathy Kushna. Good afternoon and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm here on behalf of the Rhode Island Hospitality Association and the Northern Rhode Island Chamber of Commerce. Both of these organizations support the passage of this bill, a bill that, my understanding, 27 other states have passed. The concern from both of the organizations I represent is the inability for the restaurant or the hotel to monitor the alcohol intake of their customers. And as we all know, customers can't be served once they start to show the signs of inebriation. The concern is you start to serve them a Coke or a water, they use the powdered alcohol for rum or a Cosmopolitan, I guess, is out there, Lemon Drop is out there, or will be out there, I should say, this summer. There's no way for the restaurant owner to know, and they're very concerned about the liability and misuse. The other concern that is out there is, could someone else put the powder in another person's drink without you knowing? So for those reasons, both of these organizations have concerns. Our understanding is it is supposed to be available this summer by Palcohol, which is based out of Arizona. I'd be happy to answer any other questions that you might have.
Are there any questions or comments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Metz.
Yeah, can you just explain that to me again about the not letting out the trade secrets before the summer gets here, but say that again about what the industry is concerned about as far as the mixed drinks.
Right. If I'm a bartender and you come in and you order a drink, I give you a drink, and you order a second one, and I say, he's starting to have the signs of inebriation, being drunk, I have to stop serving you. You might say, okay, how about a Coke with lemon? So I serve you a Coke with lemon, you put powdered alcohol in when I don't know it, I can't tell the difference. You've got another alcoholic drink. You go out, you have an accident, someone could sue the restaurant saying that we served too much alcohol. That's the concern.
Are there any other questions or comments? Thank you. With that, Senator Jabbour moves passage, seconded by Senator Lynch. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The bill passes. The next bill we have is Senator Crowley's bill along the same lines. We do have two people signed up to testify, Cathy Kushna and Randall Rose, as well as Jay Hibbard, who submitted a letter, and Lynette Boisels. Thank you. Mr. Rose, you can proceed.
Thank you. I'll be brief on this bill. This bill is about alcohol without liquid devices. It says it's unlawful for a person to use, purchase, or sell such a device or to offer to do so. I can see that there may be a case for taking these devices off the market. Alcohol is not that dangerous a drug if people use it mildly. Many people do, but I can see a case for taking these devices off the market, even though they do just offer just another way of consuming alcohol. However, if you want to take the device off the market, it's possible to do that simply by banning the sale of the device. I don't think people should face charges for simply using such a device. If you want to avoid having these devices in use in Rhode Island, simply prohibit their sale, not prohibiting people from using it. Since alcohol is often a relatively harmless drug, and many people in the younger generation seem to prefer consuming things through vaping. I don't think it seems particularly fair for people to face serious charges for vaping something instead of drinking it when it's the same intake of the same drug. So if you simply find it better public policy to keep this from getting on the market, it makes more sense to simply prohibit the sale and not the use and purchase of the drug. So that was the only partial objection I have to the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Randall. Are there any questions or comments for Mr. Rose? Thank you. Senator Jabor moves passage, seconded by Senator Lynch. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The bill passes. The next bill we have is Senator Crowley's bill, bill number 2063. And this is a new bill relative to submission of records from the Attorney General's office relative to sexual assaults and things of that nature. We all should have a communication from the Attorney General's office. There's no one here to testify in the bill. Senator Jabor moves to hold for further study, seconded by Senator Lynch. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The bill's held for further study. The next bill we have is Senator Raptakis' bill. Senator Raptakis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill was put in last year, but we never had a chance to hear the bill. And what the act does, it would make it an offensive for someone that leaves a 70-year-old child under 70 years of age unattended in a motor vehicle. I've handed a packet out to you, and if you pull out in the packet, there's a chapter regarding leaving an animal confined in a motor vehicle unattended, which is section 4-1-3.2. So if we take two vehicles, put them side by side in a shopping mall, and the parent of the vehicle with a child and the operator of the other vehicle leave both those vehicles unattended in extreme hot weather or in extreme cold weather, the penalty for leaving an animal under 4-1-3.2 is punishable up to 1 year imprisonment and a fine up to $1,000. The same vehicle with a child in it, the penalty is none. It is only a verbal warning, and you can see that on line 1 through 10 in the original statute, 31-22-22.1. So it's very interesting to see that under animal confinement, it is a crime to leave an animal unattended in life-threatening situation exposed to prolonged periods of extreme weather, but yet a human child under the age of 7. Also in the packet, I have a Texas state law, which had done some research after I had submitted the bill, which I do like the Texas law because it really gets down to a issue regarding when a person does leave a child in a vehicle, of what type of punishment should entail. And I know this is the first time that this bill is being heard in committee. I'm going to ask that we discuss it. There is a witness here, Mrs. Terry Sullivan from Coventry, that's going to testify, who's a nurse and who's been following this issue for many, many years, and she's provided some additional information in your packet. And that's about it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. We do have one witness signed up, Terry Sullivan, if you want to come forward.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you for hearing me tonight. Again, my name is Terry Sullivan. I'm a registered nurse. I've been one for almost 29 years.
Want to make sure your microphone's on?
Sorry. Oh, it is up.
Okay.
Am I just not talking loud enough? Believe me, you can hear me. You don't need a microphone. I'm also a certified instructor for American Red Cross CPR, First Aid AED, and I'm a member of the Rhode Island Medical Reserve Corps, DMAT 1. But of the jobs that I have, the toughest job that I have is being a mom of 6 children. It's not always fun. A lot of times it's not fun. It's very hard, and there are times when I've forgotten that gallon of milk or thought I bought that loaf of bread or whatever and had to go in that store. And, you know, I had 5 kids under the age of 10. I took them all in because freaky things happen. It's not just the weather. In your packet, you'll see Tuesday night down in Texas, a gentleman went in the grocery store, left his baby in the car. His car got repossessed with the baby in the car. Now, these guys, when they repost something, you know, they just take it and go. They didn't realize till it was in the impound yard that there was an infant in the back seat. Now, Monday night, you know, in Providence, there was a woman who ran in to get her takeout food, and the car got carjacked with the 5-year-old inside. I mean, these things also happen too. It's like you see on TV when somebody hits the gas instead of the brake, and bam, they go slamming. What if that's your car? You know, it just takes a split second for something to happen to these children. They can't advocate for themselves. We have to do that for them. So it's not only the heat. I mean, and as you can see in the packets, yeah, I did highlight on page 3, you know, just a little medical in there. The children's thermoregulatory systems, they're 5 times faster than ours. So when we're standing there with a jacket and you see the kids running around and they don't have the coat on, that's because they are hot. It doesn't, until they're about 8 months old, it really doesn't regulate. And until they're teenagers, it doesn't level off. So it is important. There is medical behind this. It's not just something that's willy-nilly pulled out of the air. It does happen. And also, if you read about the energy, it goes to the car seat. It goes to the dashboard. How many times did you get in? You put your arm on the little armrest. Man, that's really hot. When a child's in that car seat, not only are they hot because of the air around them, they're hot because of what that car seat has absorbed. So they're also getting the heat from behind them. That can get over 200 degrees, and that's from the Car Institute themselves. So there's a lot that went into this, and I hope you really, you know, just don't think, oh, it's an inconvenience, I have to run in. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about, you know, the people who go to the casino and leave their kid in the car. Those people. It happens a lot, more than we know, more than what's reported. So I'm hoping that, you know, maybe if there's a law in the books, somebody will think twice before they do it. Just a little wake-up call. So I appreciate you hearing me today. Any questions?
Are there any questions or comments? Senator Raptakis.
Terry, also the incident that occurred just right up the street in the Rentham Mall, where we had a individual who left a 8-month-old baby in temperatures around 19 degrees Fahrenheit and went shopping. Yep. And it wasn't just for just running into the Rentham Mall. She was in there for a prolonged time period. And I think this is you brought up a lot of good points. And to make this bill even better, we will make it better. And I think that a lot of issues are going to be brought up. Well, what happens if the parent runs into, like, the Cumberland Farms? Well, my answer to that is if they're visually within sight of the automobile and they're going to run in for, like, maybe 15 or 25 seconds or a minute, okay, I think that's fine. I mean, we can tailor to make this more restrictive and to send a clear message. Because what really bothered me is when you brought up the point under the current statute, under animal husbandry, we're worried more about animals leaving pets in the car and not children, and especially those under 7 years of age. And I think the year 7 is because about 8, 9 years old, they can probably maybe extract themselves from the vehicle in extreme heat or cold temperatures. But the little ones, their lives are in danger, especially during heat and cold weather. So
they are. And there's also in the packet, you know, we did a breakdown of the children, and it seems by, 7, 8 years old, the deaths go down. Like 6 years old, there's an average of 9, 7 years old, average of 3, 8 years old, 3. Because at that point, they can get out. They can get to safety. They can call for help. they can do things like that. Under that age, they really can't. They don't have the mental capacity. And if they're starting to get a little dehydrated or something's happening to them, then they really don't, because the chemical imbalances in their brains, they don't have that cognitive function, and they won't have that cognitive function. So it is very, very important.
Senator Lombardo, then Senator Metz.
Mr. Chairman, a question for the sponsor. Yes. Lou, I noticed that the Texas law puts a time limit on the amount of time that the child is to be left unattended. It says 5 minutes there. We don't have any sort of a time limit.
Correct.
Have you given consideration to
Oh,
that?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, Senator. Again, this is the first time that this bill is having a hearing, and I am absolutely open to survey the bill, listen to my colleagues here in the Judiciary Committee, and input as much information to make this a very good bill. And you brought up a good point. You've got the Texas state law. We've got some other laws. Georgia, I believe, has got some very, very good tough penalties, and I believe Florida, and I think, Terry, there was one other state. But absolutely, we're open to – look, I put out the $1,000 up to $1,000 penalty and license suspension up to 3 years. Again, the judge has discretion on the penalties. It's not mandated. We're willing even to work and try to find a bill that's going to make a lot of sense.
There was already a death this year in Georgia, and it was 52 degrees out, and the child suffered heat stroke and died. He was 13 months old, and that happened on January 16th. I mean, so it can heat stroke when it's 52 degrees, you wouldn't think, but that's how fast their bodies heat up, 5 times faster than ours. It's medical.
Thank you. Senator Metz.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Raptakis, you answered part of my question, and maybe my colleagues can help me out. Life-threatening, is that defined in the or just
no, but under the animal husbandry bill that I gave you, it's section 4-1-3.2. They do define it as a situation by exposing to a prolonged period of extreme heat or cold without proper ventilation. So there is more definition in a bill. It's a separate, Senator Metz, I handed it out to you. I'm not sure. You might have this in your packet.
Yes, you did.
Right. It's a very lengthy explanation of the circumstances. And what I wanted to do for the first time in this bill is just put something out, basic, and then that's why I want to compare what's in Title IV under animals and animal husbandry, adopt some language from there, and then we've got the Texas statute, and make something that's going to mean a lot and take a serious look at this issue and also penalize those that are irresponsible.
Yes, thank you. And I was very interested when you explained it to me earlier about having something for animals and not for kids. So that did strike me. But I was just curious about the language for life-threatening and the judges having discretion, because what happens if I take my grandchildren and it's 90 degrees, but I leave them in and I got the air conditioner on? And what happens in the wintertime? I leave a kid in the car and I leave the heat on, because people do some strange things. So somewhere there's got to be some kind of discretion where that can be all weeded out, because I agree with you, but when you have penalties and things like that, I think we need some discretion, because people do some foolish things.
And Senator Metz, you brought up a good point, because if law enforcement approached the vehicle, for an example, let's say that there's a child in the mall, and you're right, the mother runs in, the heat is on, that officer would approach the car. He would know, he would open up the door and see that the child is being kept warm by the heat being on, but then there'll be a responsibility in the clause of the bill for maybe lesser penalties for the person leaving the child. Say they left the child in the vehicle for half an hour with the car running. Again, maybe the car's locked. The parent has a separate set of keys. So again, we're going to be very careful to address every concern that is brought up, and that's why, again, this is the first time we're hearing this bill. And again, a lot of times when you hear the bill for the first time, a lot of questions arise. So we're going to answer and try to address every question and concern.
Thank you.
Senator Archibald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Raptakis, the bill on animals, cruelty to animals, is actually my bill, and
There you go.
prosecuted several people. I had to open up with Senator Lombardo on the prosecution. I've actually prosecuted several different people under this legislation in the different towns where I prosecute. So I applaud your efforts in using this bill on animals as a model, and clearly human life is something we should regard in a higher perspective than perhaps anything else. And so feel free to use it in its tenets in any respect that you need. I applaud your efforts. I had to open with that. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? I know Mr. Rose wants to
If I
speak.
might respond, Senator Archibald.
Certainly.
Senator, you brought up a good point, because when you look at the bill, what happens if we take the word animal out and we add the word child under 7 years of age? Perfect statute. If we do it for the animals, we can do it for human beings. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments for this witness? Senator Lombardo.
The only comment I want to make, and I certainly would defer to Senator Archibald, who is a prosecutor, what I would, in all sincerity, Lou, what I would do, just by way of advice, is to consult with the AG's office, because this kind of conduct may be criminal under some other statute. You know, so just, you want to avoid making it duplicative, that's all. My only...
I think DCYF, they'll go approach the parent with some kind of a child neglect.
Right.
That's about all I could find.
I'm sorry.
Lombardo.
I'm talking about the more horrific
I'm
situations.
sorry.
So, God forbid a child is killed or dies.
Exactly.
I mean, it's clearly it's manslaughter at the very least. It's negligent homicide. It's something. So it may be criminalized. Where the situation where the child is left unattended and is not injured, but is left unattended, that may be a separate statute in and of itself. But I think that there's clearly some sort of criminal legislation out there that you can fit this peg in already.
I suggested that to Senator Raptakis, even if we tear it, you know, like the first time you get this penalty, the second time this one, and the third time, or if something happens to the child, then you really get the big one.
Thank you.
I mean, any child.
Mr. Rose, you want to testify?
Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Yes, I would like to testify in opposition to this bill, although there are a couple things this bill gets right in my opinion. Bill deals with three different situations that are important to consider. One is what it mentions temperature, it mentions, and this is in the, this is from the prologue, the part that's actually been, would be amended in this bill. But the original version of this bill that's on the books already talks about temperature extremes and the danger of abduction. And temperature extremes can be either heat or cold. We heard mostly about heat rather than cold, but heat, cold, and abduction are the three dangers that this bill is concerned with. I think it makes sense that we're concerned more with heat than with cold because the way cars are designed, they do tend to trap heat. They don't tend to trap cold as much, and you see a much higher number of deaths from heat than from cold when children are left in cars. So it does make sense to concentrate on that more, and what the previous witness said is correct. Children are more vulnerable to dying from heat than adults are. If you look at the statistics, it happens especially to babies and toddlers, to some extent to preschoolers, but almost never to kids 7 years old and older. So 7 years is a good cutoff, which is what we have on the books now and what would be in this bill. 7 years makes a lot of sense as a cutoff for heat stroke. The other thing to, and as was mentioned, there have been cases of this happening, of kids dying of heat stroke in Georgia already this year. Georgia is not an accident. It's not an accident that they mentioned Georgia because this kind of thing happens almost exclusively only in the Sun Belt. I've looked up the statistics. Last year, there were a total of 24 cases of kids dying of heat stroke in cars, and almost all of them were in the Sun Belt. There were no cases in Rhode Island. There were no cases anywhere in New England. So this is something that is almost unheard of in Rhode Island. and of course, you can also look at the pattern of what months it happens in. It happens almost exclusively in the summer months. So there are some situations that are dangerous. In fact, I would expect any responsible parent, even in Rhode Island, to be aware of when it's dangerous and when it's not. But it's not something that's dangerous in every single situation. One problem with this bill is that the bill treats any possible situation as vulnerable. It doesn't matter if it's Rhode Island in October, or it doesn't matter if it's at night. It treats every situation as if it's vulnerable. And the fact is, for the vast majority of the time, there's virtually no danger in Rhode Island that a kid is going to die of heat stroke. It's something pretty rare to begin with only 24 kids dying nationwide in the whole year throughout the country. So that I don't want to say it's no danger, but it's a relatively minor danger.
Senator Boy, you have a question?
Are you finished, Randall?
I'm finished with the heat stroke part, yes.
Okay, I'll wait till you finish because you're bringing up some very good points. I'm wondering if you would work with Senator Raptakis and Senator Archambault on this bill.
I have no objection if they have no objection, yes.
Very good.
Unfortunately, this will would be harsher than most states are to parents. It's too much of an anti-parent bill in my view. Most states have no laws whatsoever on this subject. Of course, as was mentioned, you can be charged with manslaughter if your child actually dies. But most states do not have a law on the books that enables parents to be charged if somebody sees them leaving their kid in the car and the kid doesn't suffer any bad consequences. Only 20 states have laws on the books, and that includes the existing Rhode Island laws. It includes those states that only have laws which prosecute parents that the kid starts the car. So it's only so Rhode Island is already harsher than most states to parents on this subject. And I know part of the reason is that people are concerned about child abduction. And that's something that parents have very different parenting styles on. There are plenty of parents who never leave their kids out of their sight because they are worried about child abduction. But I did look at the statistics on child abduction, and the latest statistics, which I have here, from the United States Department of Justice say that, and this is a little old, but it's the latest statistics that are available, it says that the cases of stereotypical abduction where a child is held overnight or killed or taken across state lines or more than 50 miles by a non-family member, there are only a little over 100 cases per year of that. It's still a very rare thing. To see some of the sensationalist coverage in the news, you might think it's one of the leading causes of death of children. It's nowhere near being one of the leading causes of death of children. It's very rare for that to happen. They do have a lot of advice that's given to parents to keep their children safe from abduction, especially involving cars. But when they talk about keeping your kids safe from abduction and they bring up cars, what they're bringing up is the situation where there's a predator in the car and the child is on foot. That happens. That's one of the more common cases of child abduction, which is, although abduction is pretty rare, but so they do talk about cases where the predator is in the car, but you do not see the cases where a child is abducted from the car. Like the case that happened in Providence on Monday, that was when somebody tried to steal a car and didn't realize the child was in the back seat and the child is returned. That's what usually happens in these cases. I'm not saying it never happens that an abductor will deliberately take a child from the back seat. It's happened occasionally, but it's very, very rare even compared to child abduction on the whole by a non-family member, which is rare to begin with. So I just wanted to say so I wanted to make clear that some parents just look at the evidence and they make a rational decision that in this given situation it's safe to leave the child in the car. It's not as much of a danger as some of the more serious threats to the child's life. So some parents make that decision. Other parents don't want to do that. But this bill is penalizing the parent for these parenting styles. And when parents have been prosecuted for offenses related to leaving their child in the car, what you may be surprised at this, but what turns out to happen happen is mothers are given much harsher penalties than fathers. When we're judging people's parenting styles in a criminal context, it's always mothers. It tends to be mothers who get much harsher penalties. For example, when a child dies after being left in the car for heat stroke, and that does happen occasionally, as was said, you can bring a manslaughter charge for that. You don't need to amend the law for that. You can bring a manslaughter charge. And when parents are charged for manslaughters, the mothers who are convicted serve 2 years longer than the fathers. Because when we're talking about judging other people's parenting styles, and mothers get judged more, and I think that's unfair. I think it does make sense to have something on the books on this, and I do understand that people are talking about compromise, but in my view, what would be a fair compromise is what we have on the books already. We already have a law that enables parents to be notified when they're doing this and they shouldn't, and it makes sure that if a police officer or somebody else responsible tells them, the parents can be given a warning. So we already have an intervention set up. I don't think anything much is gained by putting people through a $1,000 fine and the loss of their license, because the loss of license equates to a much bigger fine than $1,000. But I don't think that's best for the child's welfare if the parent loses their license, because look, the parent is on the ground. The parent is able to make their own judgment about what's safe in that given situation, and this is micromanaging their parenting styles. Just like the judiciary tends to defer to people in the executive branch, or tends to defer to the legislature about what makes sense in a given situation because the judiciary doesn't want to micromanage. In the same way, I think it makes sense for the legislature not to be micromanaging other people's parenting styles. I know some people are very careful about not letting their kids out of their sight, but other parents take their own look at the evidence and decide in this given situation it's safe, and I think we should defer to that. So I think it's better just to leave what we have on the books now and allow the possibility of charging people for manslaughter if the child actually dies.
Mr. Rose, I'm a little troubled. So the way I read you, if a parent, father, mother, whatever, big sister, big brother, decides that they're going to go to Twin River and spend 7 hours in Twin River and leave the 5-year-old in the car, you're okay with giving that person a verbal warning?
Well, in fact, in that case, the parent could be charged with child neglect. And I don't believe that's a criminal matter. I think the consequence in that case is that they might lose their kids.
The only issue I have with that is child neglect's not a crime. That's DCYF getting involved, and I think that's what the previous witness had talked about. Her concern is there's no kind of cutoff, or there's no black letter law that tells you what period of time is enough, and I think that's what Senator Aptakis is trying to do. We've had discussions about this, and I do think this is something that needs to be worked on significantly, because it does need to be much tighter. I spend a lot of time in family court, and I spend a lot of time, frankly, in the DCYF courtroom. So while I do agree with you, Mr. Rose, that people have very different parenting styles on different issues, I think the question is, when does it rise to the level of endangering the child? So again, as the witness stated, she has 6 kids. I'm one of 10. My mother treated me very differently being the 9th of 10 than my older sister. Still has nightmares about the things that my parents used to not allow them to do, and I did whatever I wanted. So, and still do, frankly, still do. Still mad about it. So, and I'll probably get a couple phone calls because I'm sure they're watching this on TV as well. So, while I understand what you're saying, I think that, at some point, there needs to be a line drawn so we know what is endangering children and what isn't, because frankly DCYF does have a very amorphous standard that they use. They can decide on one case something is neglect, and on another case they don't have a problem with it. So while I do appreciate your position, I think it's something that may need to be looked at.
I understand that. I just would like to say
Senator Lombardo.
Mr. Chairman, since Mr. Rose, I think you accepted Senator Jabor's invitation to work with Senator Aptakis. I want to share with you, and you're free to have this. The prior witness I think this comes from the prior witness. She's gracious enough to set forth heat stroke deaths of children in vehicles by state, and I would suggest to you, and you can have this, and I would suggest to you that this is not limited to just the so-called Sunbelt states. It's actually throughout the country, and you can have my copy of it when you work with them.
With that, Senator Aptakis has said he wants to do some work on this legislation.
But one comment, Mr. Chairman, real
Senator, you're
quickly.
going to one comment, then you're going to move to hold it for further study.
Mrs. Terry Sullivan brought up a good point, because when you look at the chart, we had 14 deaths in New Jersey, 6 in New York, 3 in Connecticut, 4 in Massachusetts, 2 in Maine, and 1 in Rhode Island. So children do die in New England, and they have been dying. So I think we've got to take this issue as a serious issue and really look at the current statute and define what the penalties should be for leaving children in vehicles, where we have more harsher penalties for leaving animals in vehicles. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Raptakis moves to hold for further study, seconded by Senator Lynch, Senator DeBoer, and Senator Lombardo. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the bill is held for further study. And Senator Connolly moves to adjourn, seconded by Senator G.